Right. So, hello and welcome. Thank you for coming to the talk. So, what is this talk about? I call this the best life hack, but for your software, because life hacks are, this kind of simple but useful things, but they are not very cool. They're just quite useful, right? And I think I wanted to share some tools that have been very valuable to actually build software. So as we know, as we build software, one of the things that if you've been building software for a while, you know that people are quite elemental, an elemental part of solving the problem. And maybe also when we think about people, a lot of us maybe grow up to the idea that maybe people relates to management. And that is not necessarily true. I mean, not for everything, right? So what I'm kind of trying to circle around a bit is like architecture, right? So software architecture is something that we tend to somewhat shy away from it, from its kind of ivory toweriness that we have to it. So with all of that, you kind of start thinking about, okay, software architecture, life hacks. Andrea, where are you going? So what I want to share with you is a few tools uh, of software architecture that are really lightweight. These tools allow you to see problems, problems such as like that are very similar to this blind people appraising an elephant, right? So if you have people talking about an elephant and they're all blind, they will say stuff like, oh, yeah, it's kind of like a hose, a wall, a tree. And the problem with this is that if people continue to be blind to the problem, they will build solutions that match whatever their assumptions was, and that's just not very good, because we'll build some software that is incongruent with each other. So the one type of problems that we see is with regards to understanding, like this one. Other types of problems are about maybe understanding the landscape. So it could be that we're building software and the software is just not fit for the purpose. How could we see that? Or maybe we're choosing a subset of the solution that just does not match the rest of the strategy of the product. And so how do we see that? Again, some tools. Um, so what I'm trying to show you here is tools that not only let you see the elephant, but also the rest. And then you might think, well, Andrea, we're talking about software architecture. Do I need a special hat, maybe, to do this? And thankfully, no, because as I said earlier, these are tools that hopefully you can begin to use with little prep, although you can get quite deep into them, and you can try them with a very low error rate. The thing is, all of us as developers do architecture, so might as well do it in a deliberate fashion. And then, Andrea, you've been saying software architecture like a million times. What is even software architecture, right? And I really like this quote. I'm pretty sure you can read what is here. I like that Grady Butch here mentions design and how this is all about expensive decisions. I mean, he says it in significant decisions, but I think we're talking about architecture as those decisions that if you need to undo them, they're quite painful or time consuming, or really actually, if you put it in money costs, they will wind up meaning money. But there's another interesting word here, and that is system. I think in software also we tend to shy away from thinking about systems too much. Now, I thought that I should recommend this book by Donella Meadows. So I'm putting a definition of system here. In this book, she talks about feedback loops and negative feedback loops. These are really simple ideas that I think it's another really useful toolkit on your, another tool in your toolkit for thinking of how you build software. Because suddenly if you start thinking in systemic ways, you can build better things. And maybe if you're sitting there listening to me going on about this, you might be saying, okay, Andrea, you're talking about architecture, about design. Maybe because of Conway's law, you started thinking about teams. And all these things are things that actually affect you every day, right? These are worthy rabbit holes. And I even put philosophy here. And you might think that is a little bit pretentious of me. And that's okay. Because these two things, architecture, philosophy, these are things we deal with every day. So might as well have some link to it and stop being kind of afraid of it. Anyway, this is just a short intro on why I think this is important. So without further ado, I will go to the tools. So I'm going to talk here about 5 tools, a handful, just because why not? One of these tools would be about understanding the problem. The other one is going to be about understanding the systems you have, recording decisions, analyzing your context, and then ways to do all of these things. So for the first one, I'm going to talk about domain storytelling. I'm going to just mention this one because I happen to like it. However, I also like event storming, and I actually haven't tried impact mapping. All these tools, you can either choose one of them or use them all together, whichever one you want. All you want to do is see your problem. So domain storytelling is a workshop format that helps people have conversations about their domain. Also, secret here, if you're doing it on your own and you're just talking to yourself, don't worry about it. We all do it. It's fine. You might be wondering, what are domain story? What do these things look like? They look a little bit like this. So even if I don't explain to you what this is, and I just do a high level thing, you can see there's some users, there's order, so there's 1, 2. So if you can read it, even without any prep, I think that's really useful. I'll come back to this in a second. So as I was saying, domain storytelling they use a simple pictographic language, really, to show the people and their activities and their interactions, like I just showed. Some of the advantages that this thing gives you are, on the alignment of different kinds of people in the team, right? It helps you draw maybe some boundaries around your domain. You might be able to convert some of the stories into requirements. And one of the things that are the best things about it is that you can talk about it. You can point at things and say, in here, when it generates the thing, something weird happened. What do we do there? You can point at things. And pointing at things means it's less about the people and being right and more about this thing. I don't understand it, not I don't understand you. And that's a very different framing for questions. One of the interesting things about this is that it encourages and enables active listening. The developers, we might be maybe somewhat keen sometimes to get to the solution, where this maybe gives you some pause to really think about what is it that you're doing. When you understand the problem better, you can implement a better solution. Right. So domain storytelling, nice diagrams that have a set language, like a restricted language that tells a story and that encourages you to listen and to understand the problem better, right? That's my little summary for this. So the next tool is about understanding the systems and their context, right? So in here, the options are here, and if I could see people maybe at a mock language, a mock audience, I'm sure when they see UML, I just want to see the horror faces. But there is some diagrams that are part of UML that are really useful. But if you want to send me your reactions to this, I am very curious. However, what I do want to talk about today is C4. So I'm sure this happened to you, that you start a new gig somewhere and someone is like, hey, new person, I'm gonna drive you through our system. Come over, you'll get it in no time. It will be fine. And you're like, okay, slightly maybe apprehensive. In fact, even worse, they won't even draw it themselves in the whiteboard. No, they're just gonna show you it and drive you through it. And then when you go and see it, you see something like this. Uh, so I mean, obviously, it probably is not that bad, but what is happening here is that the person is showing you something that maybe themselves at the team that they work with have kind of developed their own little world, their own little language about, oh yeah, this thing, this square box means that, when, at 3 p.m. on the server under John's desk, this batch process runs. And you're like, what? Why are we relying on this? Or, oh no, actually, that's 3 lambdas that are wearing a coat. So it's all well and good, but maybe when in a little while it will make sense to you. It's very overwhelming at the start and maybe completely distracting. So I suggest perhaps that a great place to start is to try C4. The weird trick here is that eventually you want to be this guy. You want to be like, yes, I totally understand this domain language, but just to make the jump from a funny sunny Philadelphia guy, and the day you start, maybe you can have C4 as well, just to complement those conversations. So C4, if you have never seen it, it's very simple. This is really good for drawing either new or existing software. So it's again the tools that you have to draw it, as in you have a user, a container, a context, components, the database, that's it, and external systems. It's not very complicated. And because you have this restriction, you have to draw this type of diagrams. And you have these 4 levels, where the first level is the kind of landscape view. So you just very high level and you zoom in and you zoom in. So this would be landscape, containers would be deployable things. Level 3 would be components. So in an MVC application, this would be a controller. And level 4 would be code. I have never actually implemented the code bits because I find them mostly useful, but obviously you're welcome to do it. There's really easy tools to use them as well. So if you are a fan of Plant UML, there is plugins for that, or Miro, or whatever. There's a variety of tools. By the way, I added a resources page at the end of the slides, and I can make the slides available in my blog. So if you want to find how to make this, yes, things. So in here we see a context diagram. As you can see, we use just person. It looks as a status dashboard. If something goes wrong, uses an alert system, which is external. The data comes from a data collection system. Quite simple. It's not hard to understand. If we go to the next one, the container one, it decides to zoom in to the status dashboard. And so it's inside, and we can see a lot more detail, right? So we see details of what kind of technology we're using, a slightly better description everywhere, what kind of connections we do, and exactly how. Again, the way I think about this is things you deploy. Finally, on the component level, the building block, as I was saying, a lot more. We zoom into one component. Obviously, you would have a zoomed-in version for each of the components you care about, probably each one of the ones you own. And again, more details. How do you connect between these two things? What do you do? And finally, the code. As I was saying, I don't really care for it, but knock yourself out if you want. So why would you do C4? So that you're not funny, Sunny in Philadelphia guy. Like, don't be this guy initially. Oh, by the way, I added a little link here. In here, when I said different language, I wasn't kind of really joking. You can, when you have this semi-small language, the person there explained it as an endo language, and it's really interesting that how communities create their own languages. But it's a complete aside. It's just interesting, and it's real. It happens all the time. Yeah, so C4, really good for understanding your software. Also an excellent design tool. Let's say you want to change something, pointing at things in a diagram, again, easier, similar to the other one. Right, so earlier in the talk, we said that architecture is about the expensive decisions. But obviously, if you don't record them or note them somewhere, you might forget. How many of you have you been in a project where we did this thing 10 years ago and nobody remembers why, or maybe even 2 years ago, right? So the ADRs are a very simple tool that basically just requires you to have maybe a folder in your repository or somewhere, and you follow a template. This is one of the first ones that appeared by Michael Nygaard, but there's many others available. I like adding the any alternatives that were evaluated to ADRs, but if you want to start here, that's great. So what do? You basically, anytime you do an important decision like choosing a front-end library, React versus just plain HTML, that's quite a decision. Probably you want to document that. Think about, is it expensive to change? How expensive is it? Is it a couple of weeks or a couple of months? And you need to obviously make your call. A simple tool, very valuable. The hard thing here is keeping it up. And this is where we're going to come to the last one on how do you keep doing this. Right. So we come to one of the kind of strangest ones, I think, which is the wordly maps. Wordly maps were born out of a business problem, really. This is a guy called Simon Wordley, and he just found it really hard to come up with a strategy that made any sense. He kind of posted on different formats, and he kind of felt they were kind of empty. So what he wanted is to be able to show not just it, or like what is it that you're doing, but why and how things could change. Basically have some sort of situational awareness to his context, right? So I'm going to show you first. This is how a wordly map looks like, right? So you have a customer, and the customer has a need, right? So in this case, this customer wants to do something to do with pictures, right? They want to have online image manipulation, they want to maybe store the photo afterwards, they want to print it. So the way you read this diagram is all the lines, you could kind of nearly read them as needs. So a customer needs online photo storage. Online photo storage needs a website, which needs CRM, which needs compute. Now, I'm sure that if you're looking at this, you're going on, wait a minute, why is this positioned in these weird places? And the reason for that is that the position of it has an important meaning. And that means that if things are more to the left, they are more likely to break. They're less developed. But when they are more to the right, they're kind of a commodity. And a power is an excellent example of a commodity. So in here, we're talking about no matter what electricity provider you're using, what you want is that for sure you're getting power all the time. So it's like you more or less know what you want, and the brand doesn't depend so much. On the product side, there is variability. Custom build probably breaks quite often. Genesis is like first few times we ever did it. Another important aspect of the map is not just the left to right, which is quite meaningful, is the visibility of it. So to the customer, things around it are going to be a lot more visible than, say, the data center or the platform, right? So you might be thinking, well, sure, how is this important if I'm a software developer? Well, the thing is, when you start thinking about what you need, it's a great way to get rid of buzzwords, right? So one of the many benefits of a wordly map is not only that it helps you clarify your thinking because you're focused precisely on what is actually needed, but you also basically can hopefully remove the things that are superfluous to your decision. And you can also flesh out misalignment. Another important thing about this is that you know that a lot of things are gonna evolve eventually. So it's likely that power won't evolve much more, but things become that it's kind of like the law of the market that things will become a lot more commoditized as time evolves. So you can always think, is print gonna become kind of more this way? What would happen to our product if it did? And that's some very powerful thinking tools that can remove embarrassing mistakes as well. So yes. So, okay. So now I showed you how to understand and visualize the problem by listening more, understand your softwares and systems, record expensive decisions, and look at your current context and strategy. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, Andrea, wordly maps sound like there's some sort of overlap with maybe the domain storytelling. And yes, hopefully there is. There should be a little bit of overlap. They give you, like in the elephant example, a slightly different way to look at the same thing. The picture should be cohesive though. And this is where it's important to iterate on these things and do it often. I find that architecture is not something that you can do all at once. So to that effect, bite-sized architecture sessions. So what are these sessions? Well, my proposal is that you can change the times that I'm doing here, right? But you can say an hour-long recurring meeting, say bi-weekly, maybe a longer cadences if you now have a library of things. And in this short meeting, you decide together, and the group that should be there should be the group that needs to do stuff, right? So this is the doers, whoever they are. That group decides what are they drawing. Then you set up a timer. Let's say, for example, you say, today we're going to draw container diagram for this container. And the C4, yeah? C4 container for this subset. Perfect. Then you take 5 minutes apart if you're in person and you draw it in a piece of paper. If you're online, say you're in Miro or something like that, you go to slightly separate places, set a nice timer, and you draw it separately, alone together. After 5 minutes, you bring all the bits that you did. So what you'll find happens there is that not all of you will remember all the same things. It's very likely some of you will remember some bits better. Some of you maybe never have seen that component ever in their lives. That just knows that it exists, and maybe some bits that connect to it, and so forth. So when that happens and you bring everything together, there's a discussion. You're like, oh, this works this way, and this works this other way, and it's pretty good. So you discuss and find consensus and create a diagram with what you know. If you're not sure, obviously go and check in the code, etc. So the good thing about this is multiple folds. So because now people do architecture all the time, there's a lot less fear. So the understanding of your systems increase, and you're deliberately thinking about architecture, something that before doing this you do rarely. The resulting diagrams are a familiar design tool because this is the team that created it. An interesting side effect is that the buzz factor is removed. Suddenly, if that person that we all asked the questions to decided to like go on a holiday, or they left the company, that's slightly less of a problem, which is a good thing. It's also a great way to improve the design all around, because the views of the systems are a lot more homogeneous, because you all came together to do this, right? And I think that creates happy teams, because people own the things together. So all around, great stuff. So that's how you can do all these things together, right? You have the 4 tools and how to iterate. And with that, I want to say thanks to you, and a special thanks to Alvaro Videla, who reminded me about the interesting link about the different languages that we use. And I'd like to open the floor to any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, those resources are really good. One thing that struck me immediately, I'm sort of familiar with C4, but the domain storytelling kind of seems very, very similar to the context diagrams from C4.
Right. Do you think?
Kind of.
Right.
So when would you use one rather than?
I think you use both, because in the domain storytelling, so the container, it's this is this way, and it's very software focused, where the domain storytelling, it's a story about how customers interact with different things, and it includes, so the container diagram focuses on just the software, where domain storytelling focuses on the whole story. So this is like a person does clicks on this thing to be able to, in this case, it's like, let's say it's the cashier. It's like finds available seats. This is the part that maybe is somewhat, in fact, container diagram might be just in ticket system, right? It might be that you have some bits of screen plan there. This is an abstraction on top of it. So this gives you an even more zoomed out view than that actually tells you how things interact, where the other thing gives you like current state. This is a story. And this is also something that probably people that are not technical will be a lot more comfortable with than a C4 diagram. And they might find that, well, oh, that's not for me because it's technical. Let's go. That'll just run away.
Yeah. One thing I hadn't noticed was the actual sequence numbers.
Yeah, I thought I'd mentioned that. I was like, oh, it has an order, it's great. But maybe I skipped that.
No, I see that. That actually makes it clearer, yes.
Yeah. I really like them. And also they are deceptively hard to build, because you're very limited on what you can do. You can't just draw anything. I think initially it's much better if you do it in a whiteboard and just do whatever you want and try to bring it to a tool, and try to number them is actually a little bit tough, because you really need to think, and you realize that the system a lot less well than you thought you did, which is the value that they bring, right?
Sure. So what are the icons then? So you've got speech bubbles and you've got the sort of documents and things.
Yeah, this is kind of conversations, systems, information, or like anything like receipts, anything like that. There is a really good book that describes this pictorial language better, and I recommend you to look at it, and it's on my resources somewhere here. This video actually tells you how to do it. It's like an hour long. It's really, really good. My impetus with the talk was more to show the value, and then you can go and research it yourself and learn it.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think what I like about the C4 idea is that when I've been using it to generate sort of images for wikis and wiki articles explaining stuff, is I'll check in the source, so the description, and then you regenerate the image from that.
Yes.
So you don't have to, it's a nice easy thing, and you can diff them and stuff like that. So they're a really, really nice way of doing it when you do it with a tool,
Yeah, I use PlantUML for nearly all my diagrams. It's like such a base level tool that everything kind of plugs to it. C4, this thing as well. The domain storytelling also supports it. Although there's some more tools that are, slightly more user friendly, but for other people. But I think for coders, I think everything that I mentioned there is supported by PlantUML.
All right, cool. I have played with PlantUML before, but
yeah, and the other really good thing about PlantUML is that if you have any of the JetBrains based IDEs, they have all plugins that just work. So you're updating it on code, and it just kind of regenerates that, and you can see it, which is a nice user experience again for devs.
Yeah. When I talk to people about UML, everyone seems terrified or hates it. I don't really understand why.
I think I think we all remember maybe rational rows, and then people tell the dark stories of rational rows. But I think use case diagrams and sequence diagrams are super useful. I think people are slightly less scared of sequence diagrams, and maybe they forgot that this is part of the UML suite. But but I remember.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about UML, and they were like, "Oh, UML's terrible." And I think I was just showing my age by saying, well, if you knew what was there beforehand, where there was like 5 standards of drawing diagrams like that, and there was clouds, and there was square boxes and rounded boxes, and it was just like, it was a complete mess. UML is brilliant because it's one way to do it,
Yeah, I think, but I think it's okay that people go like, oh, UML, and then you kind of, it's like, what is it that you don't like about UML? And people go like, that is old. I don't know, I don't like it. So people told me it's bad. Leave me alone. Run away.
I think that's an excellent topic for a talk, isn't it? Why you shouldn't be scared of UML.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you can't do it to ad nauseum, right? And I think that's where it comes from. It's like, oh, rational rows. You make all the diagrams, so you don't have to code. And you're like, but maybe let me code. So I think that's where it got too much, and people kind of rejected the whole thing, where there were rescuable aspects of it. So. Yeah.
You mentioned event storming.
Yes.
And impact mapping.
Yes, I have not experienced impact mapping, but so I can't really tell much about it. Event storming, I highly recommend as a way to, you're starting on something new, or what's happening is just going wrong. Get everyone together and do an event storming session. There is basically what happens is you get people together and you try to think of, and this happened, and you put stickies. If it's online, you can do it as well. So everyone kind of swarms on different parts of it, right? So you can be something like checkout on a supermarket. It's like or like buying stuff in a supermarket. It will be a checkout section. It's like paid, bagged, and then there's obvious events. But then you start going like, how do you collect the things? What things happen concurrently? So you have not just ordering of actual events and discovering the events, but also understanding rabbit holes. It's like, oh, this is a complicated problem. We want to solve this conversation. So, and there's also many levels of event storming. So you can do high level ones or more in-depth ones. I never experienced those. I experienced more like, we need to solve this problem. Let's go. Putting stickies everywhere. I think for all of these kind of workshop formats, there is quite a bit of depth and thought put into them. Maybe so it's worth checking the sources rather than my, like, I feel like I'm just showing you stuff that I think is useful and good, and then you can go and check it out for yourself. Kind of go like, is this gonna work for me? Let's check out a video on event storming, and then Alberto Brandolini is obviously the best source, right? Since he's the creator for it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I've run out of questions.
Well, they were really nice questions. Thank you very much. Very thoughtful questions too. I like it.
I don't really have any questions myself. It was very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
A lot of stuff I've not come across before.
Yeah, I started coming across all of this, and it just felt like nobody's talking about how you find them, right? Because you need to kind of know that they exist and what do they do for you to go and try them.
Sure. Yeah.
So I did talk about it.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much for that. That was really, really, really useful.